Now, KwaZulu-Natal Premier Sihle Zikalala has tabled his provincial budget. The province's budget exceeds 767 million rand. Reporter Ronald Masinda unpacks the numbers for us. Good morning, Ronald. We heard that among other provincial priorities, the royal household in particular will be allocated at least 67 million. Just take us through the other key priorities.
Yes, good morning, Mfunda. Well, the budget speech comes amid KwaZulu-Natal's worst floods in decades, where over 400 people lost their lives. Around 60-odd people are still missing, and thousands are still left homeless. Sihle Zikalala saying that this year's financial year budget speech is slightly lower than the previous year, where KwaZulu-Natal had around 802 million rand tabled. Currently, it's around 767 million and a half. For more on what is taking place here in Pietermaritzburg, I am joined by DA leader in the province, Mr. Francois. Thank you so much, Mr. Francois Rogers, for your time. Just your thoughts so far on the budget.
Look, you know, you're quite right. The budget's been cut by the Premier, but the problem is we're dealing with the fallout from the floods and the crisis that we faced. We haven't yet recovered from the insurrection in July economically, so it's a huge task. One of the things that really concerns us is the Premier keeps talking about building this capable and ethical state, and we don't really see the result of that. If we look at the response to the disaster during the time of the crisis, the response was poorly planned. There was no structure put in place, and we certainly think that was something that the Premier should have highlighted and given us more detail in exactly how they're going to deal with the thousands of people that are homeless, with, in fact, the economic meltdown in the province. But rather, you know, he again told us that he's been given 100,000 rand for the youth, 100 million for the Youth Development Fund, when in fact Treasury's only allocated 50 million. And that's a concern, you know.
I want to go to that point because, I mean, surely that's a positive. I mean, we talk about youth unemployment in the country, and the Premier is saying that this is our focus.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. The problem is, if you look at the budget, only 50 million is allocated. But in the Premier's speech today, he says there's 100 million. There isn't 100 million, there's 50 million. We have to go on the budgetary figures. So that's why we've asked the question, where's the other 50 million coming from?
And another question that was asked by MPs is where this budget will come from. There's also concerns as to when National Treasury will provide the funds to assist during this time.
Well, that's a huge problem because obviously that's a process. There's a monetary bill that has to be passed, and you're talking about the recovery funds and the debt relief that's coming from National. Now that means that province is going to have to fund that in the interim. And again, we don't have any understanding in the legislature exactly how we're going to fund that until National comes up with the 1 billion rand that they've promised the province for recovery.
Another concern that was raised inside during the debate was there's a feeling that the Premier must step down. There are concerns as to his own involvement in the expenditure of the previous budget, where around 6 vehicles were handed to the wives of the late King Zwelithini.
Exactly. That's one of the issues that were raised, that the figures that the Premier divulged to the province are in fact inaccurate. It's not in fact what was spent. Hence we've said, once Treasury have investigated this matter, and if they find that the Premier did misinform the public of KwaZulu-Natal, he should then step down.
And just lastly, what can we expect more from today? Because, I mean, it is a very important occasion, especially following these devastating floods.
Well, absolutely. And we as the Democratic Alliance will support any government that ensures that it's ethical. You know, one of the greatest concerns, as you would have seen, is the money that's coming for the disaster relief, exactly how it's going to be spent. The province has a very, very poor track record when it comes to spending ethically, and hence we now have the Auditor General that's going to do oversight. But we will play our role in the province to ensure that the billion rand is in fact spent effectively and reaches those that need it most.
All right. Very, very lastly, should the President intervene on this matter?
Well, I think the President's already intervened. I think the President has made it clear that it's not just going to be a cheque handed over to the province, that there's going to be checks and balances, and that will also ensure that the money is spent effectively and ethically.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Fundo, that was Francois Rogers, a DA leader here in the province. We will be waiting to hear from Sihle Zikalala following today's budget.
All right, Ronald, we'll leave it there for now. That's our reporter, Ronald Masinda, outside the KZN legislature, where Sihle Zikalala tabled that budget of roughly 767 million.